Alex. It's such a pleasure to come together with you and have a conversation about the white paper that we launched recently, about some of the amazing work that we have been doing together, and what 2024 has got in it for us, considering that we are just on the verge of entering it, and I can't believe that 2023 is already coming to an end. And there's been like so many interesting and exciting and great things that we have been working on, and I'm just very, very excited to discuss those with you. So it's a pleasure to get to sit down and kind of like collect our bearings about some of the conversations that we have been having leading up to the white paper, but also following the launch of it. And as we are talking about the white paper, the unlocking success of businesses and in employee engagement and well-being in hybrid workplaces, I'm very curious to hear from you why this white paper was important to write and why now.
First of all, I'm really excited to have the opportunity to collaborate with you, Baiba. And we spent together a couple of weeks actually exploring the findings of this white paper and having you actually producing it from the very beginning until the conclusions, and I'm so grateful. I just want to highlight that before we get started, but also it was incredible because you just said that we're at the very end of this year. It's just 6 weeks just before the beginning of this new year, but we've just organized together an amazing event, and we just launched our white paper dedicated to this topic, which is very dear to our hearts, just future of work, hybrid working, where we had very inspiring conversation with thought leaders on this topic. But I feel like the white paper actually was the starting point of those conversations. And I'm so excited now that we get to explore the next step, the next stage of those conversations, because it's a dialogue really. And I feel like the white paper from your own angle, the way you started working on it was from this perspective really. It was from the perspective to start having these conversations with HR leaders within our HR community, inspiring each other, learning from each other, and being open to share even the vulnerable parts of ourselves when it comes to this topic. And that brings me to your question, right? Is why now? Why the specific white paper? And I feel like it comes down to how vulnerable employees feel, how unprepared they do share with us. That's how they feel unprepared working in this kind of hybrid environment. But then there is another thing. HR leaders are the true healers of our modern society. Those are the people from the conversations we've had the last couple of months, whom we do know they are struggling with mental health issues. They have so much on their plate. They're trying to meet their employees where they are. This is not always, it's easier said than done in many, many cases. So in terms of why now, it's because this is the right timing to just stand by those people who are the true healers of our society and just be of service. And then when it comes to employees, they are struggling. They're struggling with digital addiction, work-life imbalance, toxic productivity, and they need us. They need new ways of thinking and approaching hybrid working. So that's why, from my perspective. But what about you? Why do you think now is the right timing?
Yeah, well, thank you for that question. I just want to reflect on some of the things that you were talking about, and specifically how this, white paper and how you treat this white paper as a conversation starter. And I think we have been doing that ever since the launch of it, just a number of conversations that we've had with people at the launch event and following that, because often what we see with such reports, with white papers, with research, there's so much collateral and information out there. And that's all it is, just an informative, piece. But actually, there's a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of thought leadership that has gone into it in creating it. You and your team started it already earlier this year, kind of like June, July time. And then I kind of like plugged myself into it with having a look at the data that you had collected to start making some sense out of it. And it was quite interesting because when I found out from you just the sheer spectrum of companies that you had invited to the conversations, to the interviews, I remember asking myself and thinking, how will I ever create a cohesive story out of this? And this was before I actually had read the interviews. And I was thinking, this is public sector and private sector and agile startups and enterprise level players, across the globe, across industries and sizes. And I thought this will be interesting. This will be challenging. And at that point, we actually didn't even have a name for the white paper. We just knew that there is something important that we want to communicate, that we want to explore, because we went in this with curiosity, right. What is happening.
Correct.
And this was kind of like a data collection, learning process for us as well. So it's been really, really interesting how, as I started analyzing that data and started reading those stories, those experiences from these, HR, predominantly HR people, leaders, and how quickly these 7 key challenges, which is also the title of the paper, how quickly these 7 key challenges crystallized out of the information that we had collected, or you had collected, rather, you and the team had collected earlier this year. And so these 7 challenges crystallized, and what it demonstrated or what it communicated to me at the time was, which something, as someone who has been, in HR, in people capacities, in culture capacities for some time, it was very, I don't want to say surprising, but I guess there is a level of surprise, maybe perhaps a level of validation there as well, of just how universal our challenges are. And not just our challenges, but challenges across these organizations, public, private, startup, enterprise level, across, geographies. The challenges are universal when it comes to digital fatigue, when it comes to work-life boundaries, when it comes to us reimagining and rethinking leadership, rethinking performance measurements in hybrid workplace. All of that needs to take place. And those kinds of things, crystallized very, very quickly. And I think, a tad surprised just by the sheer universality of not just the challenges, but also the solutions that companies and people leaders go to at the first instance. And so I think when I joined the team to work on the white paper, I don't think at that time I yet knew why does white paper and white now? Because like I said, at that time I didn't even have a title for it.
Yeah.
But once those challenges crystallized, once there was a storyline to it, and once there was, real data, and of course, our sample, relatively was much smaller than, what, McKinsey's and Deloitte's of the world have in their research pieces, but actually how many parallels there were with some of these, huge market research pioneers. And so once that started coming together, I knew that this is the white paper, and this is, it's needed now, because as you said, there was a lot there that was needed for conversation starters as prompts to start, going deeper in some of those challenges, and also starting to create strategies, interventions of how we can tackle some of those things. Because I truly believe that pandemic, unfortunately, pushed HR initiatives backwards by probably another decade. And HR, already historically is, overworked and underfunded and under-resourced. And pandemic really made another big dent in that department. And now add all of the employee engagement, employee well-being challenges on top of that. I think, the kind of like the story that came out of it is HR really needs help, and they need to be prioritized quickly.
More than ever before. And it's very interesting because in my network, I am friends like with many child leaders. It is because I've been in this industry a couple of years, and we're serving many big corporates, and I get to have the same conversations over and over again. And what I find really quite alarming, and I wish business leaders would be able to see how alarming is that many child leaders share with me privately, in many cases, how much they want to change industry, or just to resign with no plan B, or that they just want to take a sabbatical, and it's simply because they are overwhelmed. And the percentage of those HR leaders I speak to daily who share this kind of stories with me is shocking. So I really believe that if we do not take action to further support and empower and uplift those leaders, this will have such a huge, really negative impact on our organizations, but also on our society in general. So I really believe that it's more important than ever before to have these conversations.
And since you are having a lot of conversations with HR leaders on a daily basis, obviously you hear a lot of their stories, you get insights about what's happening on the ground. I'm curious to, when you got to read the white paper kind of like for the first time, was there anything there that you found surprising, eye-opening, shocking maybe?
Yeah, I think the number one most shocking thing for me, it's the fact that 8 out of 10 companies do not have an employee well-being platform or an employee well-being strategy when it comes to a platform in place. And if you think about it, if you think that we live in a hybrid work environment, and the workforce is hybrid, whether we like it or not, and not having systems and platforms in place to make sure that your team is communicating, collaborating, and at the end of the day, elevating their well-being. It's unbelievable. For me personally, I truly like it. It's hard. I'm still reflecting on that. I'm like, what's behind? What's the logic? But in many cases, is what you've said before. It's like enough budget, lack of humans within the team to support, and lack of time.
Yes.
Those are the three main obstacles from my experience.
Yes. I echo that. I think that piece also raised my eyebrow for sure. I wouldn't say I was shocked because I have been in companies and I work with companies and I see that there is a sheer lack of these tools to enable to support their people and to also support, HR to then be able to report back to the leadership boards about the state of their culture, of their people. Probably another one at the back of that was also that only 30% of organizations, and this is again across the board from startups to enterprise level organizations, only 30% conduct regular employee engagement surveys. And that, again, I wouldn't say it was shocking, but it definitely validated some of my observations in the industry, which again, I think up to that moment, I hoped that they were just my experiences and they were not representative across what's actually happening in the industry. But unfortunately, they were. And our findings also match to what, the big research companies have already reported, that well under 50% of organizations lack regular employee engagement surveys. And so, and that definitely made me raise an eyebrow, alongside with the lack of, platforms with actual interventions, supporting tools to employee well-being. And even those who had those tools, who had implemented those tools, when asked, what value do those tools add? What have those tools revealed them about? Because you would kind of expect that, these platforms have, reporting capacity, insights, capability that allows you to, gather some kind of bearings about what's happening. None of the organizations were able to pinpoint what intelligence they have gathered from these platforms. And that I found very alarming, because if we are investing in anything within HR or through HR in our people, and then not using those tools in decision-making processes, then it really makes me ask questions of what's the decision behind this, and what impact is this creating for our people. And so if we can't get basic reporting in place, basic insights in place, what kind of impact measurements can we talk about here?
That's very interesting what you've just said. And I feel like then it comes with no surprise, at least to me, that the UK sits, I think it's the 33rd out of 38 countries in employee engagement, meaning, according to Gallup, right? So meaning that only 10% of the workforce in the UK is actually engaged. The other 90% is disengaged.
Or actively disengaged.
Which, of course, if there are no systems in place to support and empower your hybrid teams, and of course, when there is not reporting in place to be able to measure the impact of your interventions and your initiatives within your organization, to be able to justify the return of investment, at least, you're not, at the end of the day, you're not able to increase those numbers. So if you just have 1 out of 10 of your employees engaged, for me, this is like a horror kind of movie scenario,
Yes.
all right? So for the CEOs, for the business leaders, and that actually proves how much important is to invest in employee well-being and employee mental health, and how important is to do it with a sense of urgency, may I say, right?
Yes.
So yeah, that's my understanding from the situation, that we're in a horror movie kind of scenario where 9 out of 10 of the employees are completely,
And to piggyback on what you just talked about, because I know the Gallup report that you're talking about, and they also did an amazing piece of research over the 20 years, which we also talked about during our launch event, where Gallup looked at data points across 20 years to look at how employee engagement has changed over those 20 years. Because obviously over the past 20 years, we have invested billions, trillions probably, into development, employee engagement, employee well-being initiatives in our cultures, right? And yet, over the 20 years, the employee engagement score has remained stagnant. It has shifted up and down, over the 20 years. And then, of course, in 2020, I think, or 2019, in 2020, I think it went down for, I'm pretty sure we can figure out the reasons for that. And that is very, very alarming, that even the investments that we are making and interventions that we are creating and platforms that we are sponsoring, they are not necessarily doing the job. And I don't want to say that those platforms are not doing the job, because, that's, they are as good as the utilization of them, right? But it definitely speaks about the fact that there is a sheer lack of, internal processes, and not just internal processes, but I would go a step further and say that there is a sheer lack of understanding of the impact of people in organizations, and the power and the role that HR as a department or people department plays in that, and just how much missed opportunity there is. Because our people, I truly believe that our people, our employees, are our number one asset. And when they are engaged, when they are healthy, when they enjoy their experience with their employer, is we also see higher revenues and whatever business metrics that we want to measure our business at.
Right, and the higher levels of productivity, on performance, focus on concentration, the energy levels. I mean, you see that on every single metric. And it's interesting because there is direct kind of like connection between employee well-being and employee engagement. And there are so many surveys, so many reports which show this connection between those two key components. But then another thing that I get to hear all the time from HR leaders, and this is a question that I get to hear all the time, is like, Alex, even that in those times when we do organize some employee well-being initiatives, the attendance, the participation, the utilization rates are low. Why? What's your response as when it comes to that? What's your own take? What would you say? Like, what's the main reason behind that?
I think the reasons are, there's a whole spectrum of reasons and kind of like degrees of all of that. But just to add to what you just said, also in our findings, it was illustrated very, very, heavily, the fact that engagement. So when the engagement, when there are some, lunch and learns, the engagement is as low. Some organizations reported their engagement as low as 1% to 2%.
Right.
When it came to some e-learning platforms that they had launched and rolled out across their organization, the average attendance and engagement rate was about 25%. When it comes to some of their most popular webinars within their organizations, those saw as high as kind of like 65% of engagement. And the highest engagement was seen when there was a CEO or one of their key leaders present, leading and championing that piece of work. And I think this really highlights the role that leaders play when it in our workplace cultures, employee engagements, employee well-beings. The moment leaders show up, display the appropriate behaviors, champion these initiatives and these topics, and not just during the Mental Health Awareness Week, but every day, all year round, is when we see attendance, when we see engagement, and when we also see often employees feeling much more connected and deeper sense of belonging within these companies.
Honestly, I loved what you just said, and I think that was, to be honest with you, that was part of my most favorite part of the entire white paper, because it just confirms the power that is all about, like, leading by example. How much powerful is that? Leading by example. And that's something in the organizations we partner, where the senior leaders are super engaged, the employees are interested, are aware of the initiatives, and are really engaged. But then we see other organizations where the senior leaders do not have time, or they think that this is a nice thing to have. So if you, as a senior leader within your organization, you feel that this is another box to tick, or it's a nice thing to have, then how do you expect your managers and your team leaders in general to actually be engaged? Because your perspective on what employee well-being is actually reflects on every single aspect of your business. Everyone can see it, everyone can feel it. And it's interesting because every single time I have this conversation with business leaders and very, very kind of senior leaders, I'm like, you launched this initiative. Why you did not participate? Why you did not make the effort to actually show up at least a couple of times per month? And the response I get is always like, oh, I don't have enough time for that. And I'm like, I always say, this is exactly why you need to participate. Because if you do not have time for that, it means that you do not prioritize enough your well-being and mental health. And the direct impact of not prioritizing your personal well-being and mental health will be like a negative kind of impact on your productivity levels, on your performance, on the way you solve complex problems, and how you actually make difficult decisions. And there is a negative impact on every single layer of your day-to-day work life. So it's important. And sometimes I say in the boardrooms, people need to keep the CEO accountable and see whether this person has a self-care routine in place, an employee well-being kind of program in place, whether they follow a nice and healthy lifestyle, because all those things, and when it comes to all those things, have a direct positive impact on every single layer within the organization.
Yes.
It's incredible. And I see this time and time again.
And this again, speaks of what I was saying earlier, that the topics of workplace culture, employee engagement, employee well-being, and also topics as inclusion, belonging, they are just these elusive conversations, elusive topics that HR has over coffee or something, right? And and organizations and leaders feel that they are not tied. They're nice to have, as you said, but they're not necessarily tied to business metrics. And when it comes to business conversations, and usually the sales and your marketings, ITs hold the authority around that decision maker table. And it's usually kind of like the admin work and people work that's relegated into HR, some event management, right? Yeah. That's relegated into HR. And I feel that one of the biggest missed opportunities is to really involve HR in those conversations. Even though HR is not necessarily a money generating department within an organization, it is a huge cost center. It's a huge money saving department through sick days and through, retention and turnover and recruitment and, all of those kinds of things. So there's a huge, huge opportunity to understand the connection of employee well-being, not just kind of, again, elusive number of employee engagement surveys that get produced once a year or once every 6 months. Our employee engagement score is 75. See you next year. And that's a conversation where the conversation ends, although those should be the conversation starters. And we need to start creating spaces and intelligence to start understanding what's behind these numbers. What about our culture? What does it say about our culture? What about our culture makes some people successful and thrive, and other people be in a constant burnout state and anxiety state? And start asking ourselves those intelligent questions. And for that, we need commitment from the leaders. We need commitment in form of resources. And we need, to solidify that seat, that HR or people seat at the table. Because it is directly correlated and directly feeds into the business success.
Right. It's interesting because in many cases, I get to hear that hybrid working is medicine when it comes to employees' productivity. And now everybody has seen employee productivity has been increased and how lovely is everyone working from home. But then when you look at those surveys, for example, I was looking at this kind of report by Deloitte the other day, which has to do with Gen Zs. And when you see the numbers, they're not just alarming, it's unbelievable. Gen Z employees feel like they do not belong. That's number one in the workplace. Number two, they feel stressed and anxious all the time, and they don't know how to manage those difficult emotions. They are struggling with the cost of living crisis on top of everything else. And they say that working from home doesn't actually benefit them when it comes to getting the promotion or bonus or being perceived well by their supervisors or their managers. And this comes down to a phenomenal, new challenge that we have seen since the pandemic, which is called the proximity bias, where actually we see senior leaders and senior managers favor the people whom they get to spend most time with, or those people who used to spend the most time with at the office. And those people typically are the older generations, right? The millennials and baby boomers and all these older generations. But now, just in this post-pandemic environment with the Gen Zs joining the workforce, we didn't give them the chance to actually learn how to build those kind of working relationships at the office, or to just pick some skills from their colleagues by just looking at them, by just being surrounded by them, or we didn't give them even the opportunity to develop some kind of soft skills. And at the end of the day, build their own confidence. And because of that, there are those reports like the one from Deloitte, the most recent one, which shows that like 3 out of 5 Gen Z employees are dreaming to launch their own business or become influencers, anything else rather than being part of the active workforce. And that makes me wondering where that leads us as a society, right? And those are the conversations that I feel like the white paper is helping us to start, like to start having and being vulnerable and open enough to share, how things are at the moment and how many employees feel. Not every employee feels happy working from home. There are some employees who are actually struggling with loneliness, disconnection, isolation on a daily basis. And I know that's because we get to speak with those with employees every single day. So yeah, it's not a positive vibe. I know positive vibes, but I do believe that there is space for helping each other, building synergies, and providing new solutions, exploring new solutions even. What's your take on that?
I absolutely love what you just said, and that very much speaks to also our findings when it comes to generations. Again, generations also was something that was highlighted very, very strongly. And when we shared the findings with our partners and some of the HR leaders, people leaders who we've been speaking to, the generational gap was one of the things that we have been sharing with them and discussing with them the most. And every single one of them have resonated with that piece the most, of how much they are struggling with creating cohesive environment for all of their generations. And absolutely, we know that, we are in a historical moment where we do have a lot of different generations in our workforce, and each of them need different approach, and each of them have different needs, and each of them are at a different stage in their careers and in their lives. So there is a lot of personalization that needs to happen when it comes to their employee experience. And yet our workplaces unfortunately don't offer that at the moment.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, we've been talking about some of the findings from our own report, as well as some of the other ones that we have been reading on the way, and the conversations that we've been having with HR leading up to the white paper, and also since the white paper, and I'm sure we're going to have, many more. And I think, we really highlighted the as-is state right now, that, those conversations that we've been having thus far have been validated with the white paper and consequent conversations. So I'm curious, what now? We have the data, we have those conversation prompts and openers. Where do we go from here? What's what hope do we have 2024?
It's It's interesting because that's typically the where each and every conversation leads me when I talk and I discuss about this topic and the challenges and the trends. I get to hear this question like, okay, so what's next? What's now? And my response to that is that for like it's been 3 years really that we have been developing a product, Oxyzn, which is our one-stop shop for all employee well-being needs. And it's not just an employee well-being platform; it's an employee engagement platform. So it's very interesting because in this platform, we have automated planning, internal communications, and reporting, which eventually let HR leaders to save 20 hours per month. Because earlier we spoke about the problem of not having enough budget. There's not enough people to help with your employee well-being initiatives internally, and there's not enough time. So our solution to those three problems, which are common, is to automate all those parts, right? So that's exactly what we did on Oxyzn. We decided to automate those three kind of, let's be honest, time-consuming, daunting kind of processes. And at the end of the day, to create a solution which is based on personalization, AI, gamification, so we can create a product, a solution where meets each and every employee exactly where they are. There's not one size fits all. And this is why on this platform, we have mapped out the 10 most important aspects of well-being and mental health, from financial and family to men's well-being. An employee can find everything they need at one single place. They just filter through their preferences and they get what they need. And if that's for an hour or for 10 minutes, they can actually experience it, but in a way that helps them at the end of the day to be more productive, to boost their performance, to feel like they are at the top of their game. And that's what the engagement is all about. It's about helping our employees to be motivated, enthusiastic about the job they do on a daily basis, but also to be driven and incentivized to want to be at work, but in a way that gives them meaning and helps them find meaning exactly where they are. And that's what we do in Oxyzn, and that's a solution we actually offer. So yeah, that's our solution. I know there are many different schools of thought, but Oxyzn, has been our game changer really, and we see that on employees' feedback, we see that on clients' business case studies, and we're really excited about that.
And I love that. And I've seen the product and I've seen it in action and I've seen it being used by clients that already have had the opportunity to be enrolled on it. Because, I loved what you talked about the kind of like the key features of automation and centralization. Because again, going back to our white paper, right? Like one of the key things that we started, the white paper, the kind of like number one challenge was digital fatigue. And one of those things was also around the kind of like cause was that employees have a number of platforms, a number of internal interfaces, different resources scattered around everywhere. So actually they spend a lot of time simply looking for resources and sometimes not finding them. So what I really love about this tool is just how intuitive, user-friendly it is, how personalized it is, and how it really allows opportunity for connection, for communication, for engagement, how personalized it is to meet various needs, but at the same time, how it still brings people together.
Yeah. Because it's about building that community at the end of the day. And if we just, our employees work remotely, work in this hybrid environment, they don't get the chances to really meaningfully connect with each other and build that sense of community that we had post-pandemic,
Yes.
that we had before pandemic, right? And because of that, we really need, as business leaders, to think of new ways to bring our people together, to create those bonding experiences. It is so important.
So if you had one takeaway or one wish for 2024, what are you hopeful about in 2024?
I think I'm very optimistic about Gen Zs. I'm very optimistic about this generation. We see reverse mentoring, entrepreneurship. We see them coming up with bold, creative, outside the box solutions.
Yes.
And honestly, I have a lot of hopes from this generation. And I see that from the way they embrace and they love Oxyzn as a platform, and how they become the hero of this experience. So they don't go just on the platform just to consume content and participate on some live video events. No, they want to create their own events, and they want to write blogs and articles and to bring their own hobbies on the platform and then invite the rest of their employees to join them. And I just love how creative and innovative and brave they are to be engaged. They do want to be engaged. They do want to find the right space to feel this way. And I think that Oxyzn is the perfect playground when it comes to that.
I love that. I love that you talked about Gen Zs, and I genuinely have a great hope for the generation, and I really hope to see more organizations leaning into these young bundles of talent that are either already within their organizations or slowly entering their organizations. And instead of kind of trying to make them culture fit, but to really allow the space and opportunity for the organizations to embrace them fully and learn from them.
Absolutely.
And I have a great hope that employee engagement will finally be put on the map, seriously, be treated as a value add for employees and also for the business. And I'm really hoping that, also with the work that we are doing, that we will be able to bring that intelligence into organizations to help them, to educate them, to help them understand the sheer importance of it. So I think this is kind of like the first step and the first day, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. I loved what you've said, and engagement is not the medicine. It's not the vitamin, it's the medicine. It's the medicine when it comes to having a productive business, really, and achieving the milestones and the KPIs.
To staying in the business. I think if one thing that the pandemic has taught us is that none of us are safe. And when I mean none of us, I mean kind of like on a organizational level. How many businesses we saw go out of business who weren't agile enough to pivot, to reimagine what experiences they are bringing to their people, to their clients, to their communities, those who couldn't embrace community building. So I feel that for the longevity of our organizations, for the sustainability of our organizations, this is kind of like the number one thing to focus on. Because sales alone, I don't think will cover that anymore.
Yeah, I loved what you just said. Totally agree with you. Absolutely.
It's been so great to have this conversation with
That's
you.
amazing.
I'm glad we could sit down and kind of share these thoughts, not just behind closed doors, but to share them with everybody. And I really think that there's going to be a lot here. That this is just a conversation starter.
It is.
So we're kind of like finishing exactly where we started.
It is, and I love that it's taking place now. It's the very end of the year, because we need, those moments of reflection and contemplation, and looking back and
sowing the seeds.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Baiba. It was a serendipity kind of thing that I got to meet you, and I felt like our conversation today actually helped me to rethink a lot of aspects of this topic, hybrid working, the future of work, employee engagement. And I hope our network will actually benefit and will find it helpful, because that was our intention at the end of the day.
I have absolutely no doubt that people will benefit from it. And it's been a great pleasure to working with you and with your team, ever so talented members of your team, to bring this together, to bring this to light, and to be able to have these very powerful conversations that are well overdue and much, much needed.
It's been amazing having you leading those conversations and leading the way with the white paper. And I invite every single person from our network actually to read the white paper and take a look at those conclusions, because, as you said, they're incredible, like conversation starters, and they can lead to new ways of thinking and doing and being. So
and let us know what you think.
Absolutely.
We will be very, very excited to hear your thoughts, reflections, what you found surprising, what resonated, what perhaps didn't resonate, because again, as we said, this is a conversation starter for us. We are open to conversations and we want to learn, so this is not for us to say this is be all end all. This is a conversation starter. So we are excited to lead with that into 2024.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Cheers to that.
Cheers to that. I love that.